Welcome back to Rebuilding Rob, the podcast. I'm your host, your favorite blogger turned podcaster. My name is Rob, and we are deep into Season 2 of this journey toward 1,000 consecutive days of blogging. Today's episode is one that's been sitting heavy on my mind for a few weeks now. It's about the friction we feel when the world around us seems to be losing its way, and how that mirrors the internal battles we fight in our own heads. We're looking at the big picture and the microscopic details, from the fate of a nation to the literal wiring of a gas dryer. This is Episode 8, the 250-year clock. Here's a little-known fact that I don't talk about nearly enough. In addition to teaching English, I'm also certified to teach history. I've never actually had the chance to lead a history classroom, mostly because those positions usually come with the coaching duties attached. And while I love the game of football, I'll be the first to admit that I don't know it well enough to be an offensive coordinator, let alone a head coach. So I just stick with the literature. But among historians and sociologists, there is a recurring, haunting theory: the 250-year clock. The idea is that even the greatest societies face an inevitable decline after about 2.5 centuries. It's not necessarily a total collapse into ruin, but a systemic wearing out. A period of fading prosperity before the cycle presumably begins again further down the road. I bring this up because this year, 2026, marks the 250th anniversary of America's independence. And while I try to avoid the political rabbit hole, at least here on the podcast I do, it's hard to ignore that we are in a powerless predicament. Regardless of your stance on the current administration, and just for the record, I do not support our current president, it's undeniable that our standing, both at home and abroad, feels strained. I remember Bill Clinton's 1992 presidential campaign, where he said, "We are on the verge of being the first generation of Americans who do worse than our parents did." Well, I can personally vouch for that. I can tell you firsthand, I am not living the same quality of life that my father lived. And no offense to the old man, I'm a hell of a lot more educated than he is. And with my job experience and my education, I could probably get myself a better job than I have. Or at least I should be able to. Many of us feel a sense of despair, wondering, how did things get so crazy? And will they ever get any better? But rather than stay stuck in social despair, I have to look forward. I think many Americans are hitting their breaking point, finally. The support for the current path is eroding because people are feeling the consequences personally. And that could be something as simple as paying more for your groceries or paying more money at the gas pump. But people are feeling it nonetheless. But here's the thing. We don't just feel this civilizational decline on the news. We feel it in our own lives. I've talked at length about my struggles with anxiety and depression. Now, I truly believe that our 21st century society, this 24-hour news cycle, these dopamine-inducing traps we hold in our hands called smartphones, this insatiable American greed for lust and power, bigger, faster, more, I want it 5 minutes ago, this whole can of worms, I feel is hardwired to make even the sanest person among us feel a little bit broken. So how do we cope? Now look, I need to be clear here. I'm no doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or any other kind of ologist. I'm not giving medical advice, and I don't want you to take it as such. What I am, though, is a guy who has been down that deep, dark hole. I know the layout of the place. I know exactly what it feels like when the walls start closing in. I'm in a good place today. I take my medication daily. I know some people fear that meds will turn them into a numb zombie, or they expect it to just magically delete every bad thought they've ever had. It doesn't work like that. For me, the meds just smooth out the edges. It makes it day-to-day functional. I still get depressed. I still get anxious. Hell, even every now and then I still have panic attacks and anxiety attacks. But those bouts are fewer and further between, and they are a lot less intense. Now, the truth is, you can't always head anxiety or depression off at the proverbial pass. Sometimes it hits you so hard and so fast that it feels like even the meds aren't working. Now, I'm not saying they aren't doing their job, and I'm certainly not saying you should go off script with your dosage. What I am saying is that there are moments when the storm is simply louder than the calm. It's that feeling of being in a high-tech raincoat in the middle of a hurricane. You're protected, sure, but you're still going to get hammered by the wind. Even for me, especially for me, there are days when the anxiety digs its claws in, and all you can do in that moment is try to push through as best you can. I've always loved the old saying, when you feel like you're at the end of your rope, all you have to do is tie a knot on it and hang on. I'll talk more about where that comes from later, but for now, I just want you to know that whether you realize it or not, there are people out there, myself included, who actually relate to what you are going through. You aren't navigating this map alone. It's about finding your own mechanisms, those little tools that'll either help pull you out of the funk, or at the very least, make the climb back up just a little bit easier. I remember a Sunday about a year ago. Kid 2 was with me for the weekend. I woke up and the anxiety hit me like a truck. I couldn't stop these bursts of crying that I was having. Now, I wasn't sobbing uncontrollably, but I was definitely leaking. Certainly enough that Kid 2 took notice of it. I couldn't will myself to get dressed. I couldn't go to get the groceries that he and I had planned on getting that morning. In that moment, the system had crashed. I just had to ride it out. But then, I started learning about my own personal pattern recognition, and a few weeks later, when that same feeling started to creep in, I caught the early warning signs. I didn't wait for the paralysis. I grabbed Kid 2 and we just moved. We went to the store. Just getting outside of the four walls of the house was enough to break the funk. And then there's this past spring break. I spent it doing maintenance, the kind of stuff that usually triggers my anxiety. I fixed a mailbox. I repaired a gas dryer. There were moments with that dryer when I wanted to give up. I almost convinced myself just to finance a new one, but then I remembered, just because something is old doesn't mean that you throw it away. I think the real reason I'm so proud of that dryer repair isn't just because I saved the money. It's because I didn't give up on myself. When you're sitting on a cold basement floor, staring at a machine that refuses to work, it's easy to let the internal ghost of doubt take over. You start thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe I am just an English teacher who should stay away from gas lines. But I kept attacking it from different angles. I stepped away, I let the static clear, and when I came back, recall kicked in. That is the core of the audacity of potential. The willingness to believe in your own competence, even when the world, even when your own family has spent years telling you that you are perpetually 8 years old and incapable. When that burner finally ignited, it wasn't just the heat for my clothes. It was the fuel for my self-esteem. Then there was the flagpole. For years, I wanted that thing down. But the ghost of doubt, the voice of my mother, was always in my head. She'd say, "Don't do it! You'll drop it! You'll put it through a window!" She saw me as incapable. But for me, taking that pole down was a controlled demolition of that doubt. I didn't break a window. I didn't drop the pole. I took the tools, I took the lead, and I cleared the view. Now, I know I said earlier that just because something is old, it doesn't mean you necessarily throw it away. But sometimes you do have to tear down the old structures or the old narratives to see the horizon. Oh, 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 oh. There was a legendary DJ on Detroit radio back in the 1980s, the Electrifying Mojo. He ended every show with a quote that is often attributed to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the same one that I mentioned to you earlier. When you reach the end of your rope, tie a knot in it and hang on. The 250-year clock may be ticking for the country. The ghost in the grid might try to blow your fuses. But as I sit here on day 950-something of this journey, I've realized that the rebuild isn't about being perfect. It's about maintenance. It's about catching the anxiety at the pass. It's about fixing the dryer instead of throwing it away. America might be 250 years old, and I might be 52, but we are both still here. Tie that knot and hang on. I'm Rob, and this has been Rebuilding Rob, the podcast. I will see you on the next one. This episode of Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, was produced, edited, written, and hosted by yours truly, your favorite blogger, a guy named Rob. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I'm well aware that, like me, you have a ton of podcast listening options, so I'm honored that you decided to take a little bit of your time out of your day to spend with me. Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, is available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Of course, you probably figured that part out already, or else you wouldn't be listening to me right now. If you're interested in more insight into this perfectly ordinary, non-going white guy, feel free to check out my blog, rebuildingrob.com. So until next time, this is Rob, reminding you to be audacious, be bold, be brave, be strong enough to be gentle, and remember, the rebuild never ends. Bye, everybody.